this video, I want to discuss a really strange story that happened in October 1928, involving a man who seemingly disappeared while aboard a vessel, which was in the Atlantic Ocean several miles from Miami, Florida. A man named Bill claims that, at the time, he was working on a tanker ship that ferried goods back and forth across the Atlantic. As they were about to dock the next day, Bill recalled that he had walked to the ship's library. He knew that tomorrow would be very busy, and he wanted to relax for a bit. Though, as he entered the door to the library, something odd occurred. To him, it was as if reality, as he knew it, changed. There was an eerie silence, like he was in a vacuum. He suddenly felt almost isolated and completely alone, something he found to be bizarre, given that it was a small vessel, and there was always people lingering around. He noticed that there was nobody in the library, which he also found odd given that it was usually quite busy, especially after a long crossing. He continued to look around the ship and still could not find any people. He headed back out onto the deck and immediately noticed that there was no sound of engines. Even stranger, he could not hear any waves lapping against the hull. He likened it to being inside a bottle where everything was suspended in time. Bill began to wonder if he had somehow missed an emergency that had seen the engines stop and the ship to be abandoned. He peered over the edge to see if he could spot some lifeboats off in the distance, though what he saw when he looked over the edge was much weirder and scarier than that. He observed that everything was bathed in a gray, misty sheen. Everywhere he looked, the sea and the sky seemed to blend into one wall of seamless gray. The monotony went on forever. He could see no horizon. Nothing was moving. It was exactly as if time stood still, and he was no longer part of the world that he knew. From where he was, Bill could see almost every part of the ship deck, as it was largely flat, but not one other person was in sight. Almost in despair, and with a degree of logic, he sat down on the deck, which he knew was so narrow that anyone passing would have to see him or fall over him, and someone was bound to come his way, as they always did on a busy ship. He simply could not accept that he was alone. He was certain that someone else had to be on the ship. Not long after he crouched down, he suddenly heard a crew member come rushing towards him, shouting with relief. Bill was surprised to learn that the whole crew had been looking for him, and that they believed he had fallen overboard. When Bill attempted to point out the bizarre grace surrounding the ship, everything was back to normal. The sea, sky, horizon, engines, swell, everything was normal. The crew member then informed Bill that he had been missing for an hour, and that they had searched every inch of the ship in that time. Bill simply could not understand what had happened. For over an hour, it appears as though he had slipped into another place, a place of utter gray, where time seemed to stand still. During the trip back, his crewmates tried to convince Bill that he had merely fallen asleep someplace on the ship that they didn't look, and the whole thing was merely a dream. It was the only option that made sense to them. Bill never accepted that suggestion, and was convinced that the whole thing really happened, and that for a brief period of time he was somewhere else. Even now, over half a century later, his memory of the event is still quite vivid. So did Bill momentarily slip into another dimension, or did he, as his crewmates suggest, merely dream the whole thing? In my video, An Incident in Algonquin Park, I discussed a similar type of case, in which a woman hiking down a trail in the woods seemed to slip into another place, one in which she found herself alone and completely removed from her reality. Could these shifts be a possible explanation for some of the people who go missing every year? Unlike Bill, is it possible that some of the people who drift over never find their way back, forever forced to exist in a place similar but separate from our own.